We'll get going. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks once again for joining me, Kirk, here at Pastor's Positive Mental Health Institute with another wonderful guest, a California guest in an area that I enjoy in California.
Yeah.
There's nice fruits from vines in that area.
Hmm.
This will be Pastor Chris Simmons, and we'll get him to talk about himself in just a minute. If you like what you're hearing, please like, share, subscribe. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. So let's just get into it. Chris, thanks so much for joining me. First of all, before we get into your current context and your current church, tell me why you became a pastor. What led you down this path?
Sure. What a long journey. So it's only an hour long podcast. So I can preach for 49 minutes of it, and then we'll talk for 11. No. Uh, a kind of a bizarre series of circumstances as God works in mysterious ways, chooses those that he's equipping in different walks of life. I came from a family background that we didn't go non-Christian, didn't go to church, anything like that. Raised never going to church. I remember I had a friend. I went to a school that had a lot of Catholic kids, a public school in Chicago, and just Chicago is also very culturally Catholic. So that they would go to something like their catechesis class on a Wednesday called CCD. And I had a friend in 5th grade, did a sleepover at his house. And he's like, you're going to hell, right? And I'm like, oh. And I had a nightmare that night that Satan reached through the couch cushions and drugged me into hell. And I was like, oh, man, this is really intense stuff. And had a belief in God based off a different just circumstance in 1st grade, but never knew who Jesus was. Got to know who Jesus was. I'll make it a very short story. Had a really cute girl invite me to church when I was in college at Concordia University of Chicago. I went there not even knowing it was a Lutheran university, believe it or not. It was just close to my apartment. And cute girl invited me to church, and I said yes, heard about Jesus, cried in front of a cute girl that I've been dating for 2 weeks. Good thing I married her, because that could have been embarrassing, right? And here I am. I was actually a ballroom dance teacher. I was in the circus professionally 7 years, and then a ballroom dance teacher after that. And while teaching dance, here's where I'm getting to it. My wife and I, there's a bunch of awards over there, but not even half of them. We were very successful in what we did as dance teachers. Toured all over the US, did different competitions, won awards as dancers, but as teachers as well. And just had a lesson. It was near Christmas time. And I said, she's an 84-year-old lady who was a widow, and loved teaching her and loved enriching her that way. But after a long sit down, and she was just sad because it was that time of year where she missed her husband and didn't really have the hope of Christ with her. And it wasn't a circumstance where I could really bring that forward. And I said, dancing's great for her, but what she really needs is Jesus. And that Christmas Eve service that we ended up attending, again, God works in great ways, a much longer story, but we were supposed to be in Santa Rosa, California on a vacation, but my wife's grandfather got very sick and passed. And this was right after we did a really big dance show where out of the 20 numbers, I was in 13 of them. And we were so excited for a vacation, so excited to, get out of the state and rest for a while. But then, just a time of deep impact and a bit of sadness. And we went to Christmas Eve service, and it was at Emmanuel Lutheran in Downers Grove. And the pastor said, God brought you here for a reason today, because there's something you need to know. And there's something he needed to tell you. And it's time for you to know and take that next step. And my wife and I looked at each other and didn't say a word, never even considered going into ministry. And we both knew sitting there that I was going to go into the ministry, and it was time to leave the dance business. We walked to my car. It's not an exaggeration. Walked to my car. I put the key in the ignition, started it, and didn't even shift it in the park. And my wife said, so, are you applying for seminary tonight? And I said, I guess so. And we drove off. And that was it. We never talked about me being a pastor ever a moment before that. It was unique. You don't go with, and like we mentioned before, it's not super like a charismatic movement or anything like that. But man, it was just impactful.
Yeah.
And it was right. And that's the road I've been on ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell us the name of your church, your current role, and about the church.
Yeah, I'm at Trinity Lutheran church and school out here in Paso Robles, California. Love being a part of a church and school. I was part of one in Pocatello, Idaho, out by Kirk for a while. That was Grace Lutheran, and they had a preschool, diapers to diplomas over there. Pretty similar model here. So at Trinity Lutheran Church and School, we have a preschool, we have an elementary through 8th grade, and then we actually have a thrift store as well. And that thrift store operates in the black, so it makes money, and all that money goes towards scholarships for students attending our school.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Nice. So what's your role in all this? What do you get to do?
Ooh, as a pastor, what don't you do sometimes? But it's a bit of everything. Some of it's the way our governance model is set up. So it's a policy-based governance where I'm kind of the tip of the spear, so to speak. I would say it's the church staff, but that kind of comprises of just me. And there's a long history with that, but we'll get to the point where one of your questions is like, how do your members support you? And there's a great story with that. But, staff, we have obviously a principal, and we have a preschool director. We manage the thrift store. We have a church council that helps with the management, policy-based governance. You have a set, policy manual or anything like that. You operate within those bounds. You report every month to kind of see, are you achieving your end statements and your end goals, things like that. But I kind of do a bit of everything. My job is to kind of see that we're meeting our end statements. Are we pursuing ministry in all 3 of those or 4 of those areas in the way that we're designed to, and really kind of staying on track vision wise? So,
and you get to preach on Sundays.
Yeah, and somehow it's a Sunday miracle once in a while. It's a Sunday morning miracle where I'm like, ooh, how are we going to get to church even on Sunday? Because there's, with 3 different organizations, and the church itself is another one, really, with 4 different entities sometimes going at the same time. One will demand a lot more attention circumstantially than another. And you have to, a challenge can be not getting pulled too hard by the gravitational force of one aspect of this organization at a time, because then you start to lose sight of it as a whole. So,
yeah. Mm-hmm. So with all those working parts, how do you rely on church members?
Golly, a few different ways. One of them is the way our council really came together this year. We have a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, and a few, members at large. But it's a smaller council that, it's my first time. So I've been here since October of 23. So I kind of inherited a council that was here before in the way, and they were vacant for a while. They had an interim pastor for about 18 months, but before that, they had been vacant for quite a bit. And it was like, all right, well, where are we going? What are we trying to do? And you grab onto what you can hold on to, right? To keep yourself afloat when you're just trying to make it for a bit. And they did a great job. But when you inherit a council and some of that mentality is still there, you're trying to say, hey, we're trying to set a course. And you have a bit of struggle with it at times. And as we started to breathe in deeply some new vision, some new mindset, new ways of moving forward, behold, I make all things new. I'm just bringing up a new thing in Isaiah. Can you not perceive it? With a new council, we really started to say, okay, hey, as president and vice president and treasurer and secretary, we're meant to be a part of these organizations, not just meet and report. So like all of a sudden the council's the one out there. We did a back to school barbecue for the first time this year that we fed all the teachers and got to be out there, interact with them. But the council were the ones that cooked the food and nice. Got the buffet ready. And we're out there, with the good old nice frothy Lutheran beverage, right? And hanging out with the teachers and getting to know them and know them by name and be supportive. What other ways can we support our teachers? That's part of our meetings now. It wasn't that way before. It's one of the questions that come up. How can we support? We call them our ministerial staff because it's what they are. The front lines in the classroom, bringing the gospel to our students in not just methods of academics, but directly teaching in Christian studies. We're talking preschool all the way through 8th grade. They are our ministerial staff. So what are we going to do to support them? And that's a huge shift, which has been great. And it doesn't feel like I'm just trying to do it by myself anymore.
Nice. So can you tell me about a moment when maybe you were kind of down a little bit or overworked or whatever you want to call it, but then felt built up in the ministry?
A moment, huh?
Yeah.
Let's go with the most recent one. Is just yesterday, we had someone who's been very kind to me since I've been here. He passed away yesterday, and it happened pretty suddenly. he was strong. He was one of our readers, always active in church. He and his wife have loved the school. His wife has always volunteered, been an aide, and uh, helped out there. He was instrumental in building a few of the buildings on campus for the sake of the school. And just an incredible guy. And I'd gone to visit him. It was about 3 hours to drive to University of California in San Francisco. But when he all of a sudden was in the ICU and they had to drive him all the way there, I'm like, man, he's been such a powerful force here for the congregation, the sake of the church, and clarity and transparency and living out the gospel. I've got to go and see him. So I drove all the way up there and I saw him. We did communion at the ICU, came back. He came home, but it hadn't been 3 weeks since then. I came home from a wedding I was at this weekend, saw him on Monday. Today is Thursday. Saw him on Monday, gave him communion, and he was in and out. He's been on hospice, a bed in his living room, and in and out of it a bit, but still very with it mentally, cognizant, and gosh, just built me up a lot. He on his deathbed telling me how grateful he is of building up the congregation and seeing people coming back to church, and my investment in the school and the investment in people and how God is working through me, but that I'm so willing, and how grateful he was. And in all this, and I'll say it frankly, he was very frail, and he was so thin, hadn't eaten in days. And that's probably one of the factors in his passing yesterday. He yells out to his wife, he's like, "Bring me my billfold." It was like, what? He was like, "Bring me my billfold." It was after we all communicated, I was leaving, and he takes $50 out of his wallet. And he's like, "Pastor, you need to take care of yourself and your family. Do something nice with your family." And it was pretty insistent. And I said, "No, Paul, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to be with you. And your words are plenty to build me up. And I really appreciate it." He's like, no, really take it, do something with your family. And I wasn't trying to be, I wasn't trying to neglect the gift. I wasn't trying to push him away. But I mean, the man's on his deathbed trying to hand me $50. I'm like, take care. I want to build you up. I want to be here for you. And his wife's like, "Would you just take the money?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
So he hands me a $50 bill, and I send him a photo that night of my family and I out for frozen yogurt. And I said, "Thank you." And yeah.
Wow.
And it was just a moment like that of being so insistent, in a moment that many people would be so dire. Man of great faith, though, and all smiles that entire visit. It was just a powerful witness to the moment of an assurance of faith that you have in Jesus, an assurance of faith in the capital L life, that we have in Christ.
Yeah. A couple of things on that is to church members, keep serving the Lord until your last breath. Number one. What a great example. That builds up pastors. I mean, you got to see the end, but there are other pastors along the way that got the benefit of that man as well, and the church got the benefit of it. But the other thing that's important too is that let your actions also match your words. And I know it's hard sometimes for pastors to receive gifts from people, although inwardly we really do appreciate them. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, your words are awesome, and we love those words. But now your actions match those words, and that make the words so much weightier and just valuable. And so, church members listening to this, just hear that. And then pastors listening to this, takes grace to receive. So and also a wife that demands that you obey the wishes of her dying husband. That helps too. So
a little bit.
So Chris, you've been doing ministry in various ways for several years now. What's been maybe one of the most challenging aspects of ministry?
Gosh, it's amazing how each congregation has its own challenges. Moving from a very large ministry like I did at Grace to one that's smaller here, not in vision or mission, but in capacity. My challenge here, and it's a challenge we face nationwide right now, it's staffing.
Yeah.
Here I am in California where the minimum wage, you're talking minimum wage of $20 an hour.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, so churches have to absorb that cost. And if you have a church school combination in particular, well, in order to pay teachers more, you have to raise tuition, or you have to build up you have endowments and things like that, scholarship. But at some point, the cost is becoming astronomical, where people are losing out on work, and then you have lower enrollment in your school and somehow have to raise tuition in order to pay teachers more for retention. So you have this balance of, okay, how do we keep retention of employees while keeping tuition at an affordable rate so we can seek to do our mission, right? Bring the gospel to all generations, the benefit of Christ to all people who walk in through our doors, and really build up what it means to have that future in people spreading that good news. And you can get lost in the weeds of tuition rates, benefit costs, and all these different pieces that really go into it. So it's challenging. And in a governance model such as we have here, pastors don't go to a class sometime in seminary and have about HR. How do you shop for insurance? What do you do? What are different rates for, when you're doing payroll? What's the best company to go and use for payroll? Are your taxes coming out in and out at the right rate? So many different aspects of the business part that, you can hire people for, but you need to know. You can't sit in ignorance, because that's where the bad things happen. There's history of, you hear it across nationwide, of whether it's churches or whether it's small businesses, anything like that. There's history of embezzlement. And it's because people live in the state of ignorance of not even, oh, I don't touch that. That's just not my lane. And I know everyone has the right seat on the bus, but we're not called to live in darkness either. It's like, I need to know as a leader just enough of every piece to know that everything's all right. I don't need to be the one running the show on everything. Yeah. But if someone comes and gives you a report from their department, you can't just sit there and nod and turn to your neighbor and say, I have no idea what he said. Do you? Well, no idea. Yeah. It's like, you should know what a GL is in QuickBooks. You should know the number of points in your ledger items. You should know what each of the acronyms are for the taxes that come out of your paycheck. It's like, you should have enough knowledge to not, like I said, walk in darkness, but lead people well.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You have unique challenges, again, with the way your government is set up for the church and the school there.
Sure.
And so you can have a lot of people listening to this and going, wow, I'm glad I don't have his job, right? And so let me ask you this. How have you relied on church members to kind of meet some of those challenges that you were just talking about?
Oh, yeah. So our treasurer, he's absolute dynamite, and he's new. So he just took the job right when he was assisting for a bit, but man, did he just step up. And, we have a bookkeeping company, but it's meeting with them. It's knowing these people that are doing your books. It's having those balances, everyone's walking alongside someone else. Jesus sent them out 2 by 2. Don't have anyone siloed and alone. Someone's doing all of your book work by themselves. There needs to be someone else alongside them. And as a leader, sometimes it's you.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not that. It could be challenges like, we have a facility. You can see it's behind me. We have our sanctuary. We got a fellowship hall. We got school buildings. You should walk in the school buildings when there's work days. As a pastor, I'm there at the work days. Am I the guy chopping down trees? No, I'm changing light bulbs. Yeah. But I got guys out there chopping down trees, and they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And it's as especially clergy and in leadership, there can be a problem of you feel like you have to be at everything. Yeah. I don't feel like I have to be at everything. I feel like I'm in the know about everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a big difference. And that being in the know can be just as powerful as my presence. Because then the people that were there, it's like, hey, I heard that you came to our family field night that we had last week. Did you really enjoy it? Was it a lot of fun? Awesome. I saw the pictures and people told me about it. I'm going to try and make it to one of them, but I'm glad that you and your family felt safe and had a lot of fun at it. I wasn't there. I know about it though. And that's pretty important. And that was run independently. Those were run by church members and our principal and school boosters. But yeah, there are key people in places where they're helping me out.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, a lot of unique challenges, especially in not just California only, but in your particular area of California. There's some challenges in the lifestyle that people like in Paso Robles, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's really good. And I think that one of the things that you say it's really important is keeping a pulse on everything that happens in the ministry, because that's it's easy for again, as ministry grows, sometimes it's hard to do that as well. But you can't be at everything. It's not healthy for you to be at everything. It's not good for your family to be at everything, and it's actually not good for the church members for you to be at everything, because they need to be self-sufficient, for lack of a better term. They need to be able to connect together, and it's their church, it's their ministry, not just your ministry. And so you facilitate what God has placed there among those group of believers. And so that's a great thing that you get to do. Now, you kind of told us this one story that I know made you smile, but you can't use that now. So you got to look at something else. Tell me about how someone in your church made you smile within the past 2 weeks.
In the past 2 weeks, huh? Let me see. I've got one guy that he's retired, but that doesn't mean that it should stop anybody from doing anything or participating in their church, right?
They should do more when they retire.
Man, I don't. I'm happy to. I don't want to say take what I can get, but I'm happy when people serve with a grateful heart.
Yeah.
And since I've gotten here, man, he is just. I've just seen him blossom in a way where he just serves with a grateful heart, and I'd call him a dear friend. We had a point that when I got here, and it felt like the walls were caving in a little bit, circumstantially, because there was like just a lot of changes had to happen really quickly. Not because of, long story short, let's just say they tell you when you go into a new ministry, try not to change anything within a year. That's what I thought I was going to do. I won't change anything in a year. I got here. Couldn't help it. Many things just kind of dissolved upon arrival, but that's all right. A blank slate, man, the building of something new. And the people here have such willing hands and willing hearts. When I came for the call, like the interview process, that's what made me come here. Were the willing hands and hearts that were excited for change and something new, and wanting to serve not just the community, but the people here in their church and the people at the school. And this one guy, he comes and he puts stuff together for me, and I'm so grateful for that. But he put together a rolling chair rack that I had ordered, and he picked it up at Home Depot for me. He put it together, and we cleared the fellowship hall, which had always had tables and chairs set up in it, and like stacks of folding chairs leaning against the walls. We don't have an indoor PE space here because it's California. Many places don't. But we have a week here where it's 107 degrees right now. Outside, it's like right now. Well, it's in 90 degrees now. It'll be 107 by 2 hours from now. It's just a big heat wave, and that just happens once in a while. Yeah. But when it was that hot about 2 weeks ago as well. But we had cleared out all the chairs and the tables, and I'm like, I want this to be a space that's available for indoor PE. If kids need to come in here and they need to stay out of sun, they can do that. And we did that the very next day. I look in there. Kids are playing dodgeball in one section of the fellowship hall. The other section of the fellowship hall, they're on those like belly scooters, and they're playing like cat and mouse. And I'm like, oh. And I tapped him on the shoulder and said, Mike, that's because you were able to come in here and do that for me. Yeah. I couldn't have done that. I had no time. And this is happening because you were here to help me. Thank you. And like I said, overwhelmed that him and my buddy Brian, at one point I called him like, this is my Aaron and my Hur, right? They're holding up my arms like Moses, right? And if you drop my arms, we start losing the war. Hold my arms up. So they were holding my arms up. Yeah. They're so great.
Yeah. No, and he mentioned something I think really important is that you called it out. Mike, I think his name was, that you said, but you called it out to him. And often we don't do that. And I think I'd like to add to that, encourage not only you, but any pastors listen to this, and tell them why it blesses you too. It's like, hey, this really helps me know that people are engaged and invested in the ministry, which helps me do my job better and just gives me great joy and pleasure, which comes out in the words that you say. But I think sometimes for you to say, wait a second, this increases my personal satisfaction and makes me know that I'm doing my job and that I'm having the effect that I'm wanting to have. And so calling that out to them, but then also for yourself. And so I think that's great. And, I like telling people when they'll say something to me, I'll get a message, and I said, you know what, thank you so much. That really encouraged me, and I wanted you to know that. And so they're just being either thankful or grateful or just saying something to me. But for me to just be mindful to go, that actually is very encouraging to me, and I need to recognize that and tell them how encouraging that is. So that's great. I'm so happy and that you have those guys there that can bless what you're doing there. Because I know that well, I know you well enough to know that God's going to do some great things, even in California. And God bless you for moving to California. I mean, being a California kid myself, I can't even think about moving to California. Anyway, so if you were
using an Idaho reference, the salmon swimming upstream, so to speak, almost when I was driving here.
Yeah,
but this part of the Central Coast is just a little haven. It's so nice, but even no matter where you are, you're called to be where you need to serve those people. And I find I was thinking about this the other day, without it being like a huge thing, but I know that there's the impact culturally, and I just was in Idaho last week, and I see all the billboards are up now. It's like, keep your California out of don't Californicate our Idaho. Those boards and stuff. Vote no on this proposition. And I'm like, man, living here now, being here a year, I find, having been from Chicago, that's where I was from originally, it's just like the tidal wave starts here, but it washes over the whole state. The cultural things that are here, like I go to Twin Falls or I go to Pocatello, I see the same things there.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, just because the wave starts here, it doesn't mean the wave doesn't make it there and there and there. Jesus warns us, this is the way the world is going to go. How are you still going to love people in the midst of it and stay true to Scripture?
Right.
In particular, right?
Yeah.
Love one another as I've loved you, so you must love one another.
Yeah. No, it's funny because one of the things, as I was talking before I moved here to this part of Idaho, and of course I'd been here 30 years ago. But one of the things that was told to me goes, well, we have the college, and so it's not all conservative. There's some liberalism happening, and made me laugh because here I am from Placerville, California, which is like people they love their marijuana, and they're very new agey, and I'm like, and I grew up in Grass Valley, Nevada City area too, and Santa Cruz. I mean, all those things. I'm like, you guys don't know you really don't know what this is. But to the point that you just made, they're experiencing it more than they ever have. And a lot of that has to do with multimedia and access to media and different thoughts that you can't be sheltered like you used to be, but that's a different podcast. So if you were to sum it up in just a handful of words or sentences, what's the desire that you have for the people at your church?
The desire I have for my people at my church. A few weeks ago, I preached on where Jesus says, where his mother and his brothers are outside and they want to see him and they can't get in. And the disciples say, hey, your mother and brother here, they want to see you. And Jesus says, my mother and brothers are those who hear the word of God and put it into practice. It's this idea of hearing and doing. And we tend to, as Lutherans, we love tension, right? We live in tension, sinner and saint, law and gospel. And this is just another one where there's a tension of hearing and doing. And we get pulled too much to one side. We get pulled to hearing, where we just want to sit and hear and listen and judge. And we just want to say everything else is just the problem, but I'll sit and I'll listen. I'll come to church on Sunday and I'll hear the words, but then I'll go home. And you almost compartmentalize the whole thing to just that Sunday morning. So we'll hear and we gravitate that way, or we gravitate too much to doing, where that'll happen to me is I'll just do. And then eventually I forget why I'm doing certain things. And we as Lutherans do this a lot. You'll go to divine worship at, setting 3 or whatever it is. And it's not that any of those individual items are bad, but when you are no longer doing them intentionally, there's an issue. You're just doing them because that's the next thing on the list. And I want for the people here at Trinity to live and listen, to hear and do as God's people, right? Nothing we do here is without intention. Every part of our worship, every part of the missions that we engage with, the partnerships we have across the community, what we do for the school, we're just not doing things, and we're not just hearing and complaining. We hear and do. We live it out. We move with intention. So that's my desire for them, to live intentionally in the gospel, hear and put into practice. Be those brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah, I think you just took the playbook of James and said, "Hey, don't be hearers only, but doers," and thus not deceiving yourselves, right? And so that's
our summer sermon series was James. We did the whole book all summer.
It's funny, we did it for Bible study here all summer.
Yeah, right on.
And I know Luther wasn't a fan of it, but I find it extremely, if you teach and preach it in context, it's extremely helpful.
Exactly.
So, which I'm sure you did. So
absolutely, yeah.
Well, awesome, Chris. Thank you so much. I just appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and I'm excited for what you're doing out there in California, and the connections you're making, the impact you're having for the kingdom, and moving that ministry forward to greater heights as God leads you. And so blessings upon that work. And I thank everyone who's listening and watching. Again, if you enjoy this, please like, share, and subscribe. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to talk about, because together we're going to build one another up in love so that we can help the church flourish. Thanks so much, Chris.